Do you know what mine is, Ollie? Mine is selflessness. I have no interest in whether you are successful. Truthfully, I respect it enormously. It doesn't draw me to you. Kind people are what I get drawn to, and people who give themselves selflessly. The things that I naturally love are the things I lent into and were probably well received in a world where they're not as abundant as we both think they should be. You know, being truly kind, being genuinely interested in the prospering of other people, and not entirely obsessed with a commercial version of success was the pathway I picked up on early in my life, and has given me to this point a very fortunate quality of life. When I'm not leading a life that matches the version of me that I hope to be, then I have made big changes at that point, supported by my wife, who would rather I was happy than wealthy.
I'm Oli Hall-Green, and I'm the founder and host of Shapes of Resilience. In this podcast, we explore the raw, unfiltered stories of those who refused to give up, turning adversity into strength, setbacks into lessons, and pain into purpose. Through these inspiring stories, we can learn and find resilience in our own lives every single day, because true growth isn't found in comfort. This podcast discusses sensitive topics including trauma, suicide, loss, mental health, and illnesses. Some conversations may be distressing, so please take care whilst listening. And good morning.
Good morning to you. Pleasure to be with you.
Absolute pleasure. This has been a long time in the waiting, and I'm very, very grateful this morning to be joined by Mr. Oli Patrick. Oli's someone that I connected with when I launched my podcast. I reached out to Oli and said, I'm here, I'm a new podcaster. If there's any advice or tips you might have, then that would be welcomed. And Oli was kind enough to reply with some words of wisdom and some encouragement, which didn't go unnoticed, because not many people give you the time of day really in this world we live in. So it was very, very gratefully received, and gave me that little bit of encouragement right at the start that I needed. So thank you firstly for that.
It's my pleasure. And you asked in a very lovely way, Oli, and you are asking from a place of mission, which is slightly different to some people who are, and I'll try and help anybody, because who am I to withhold anything that I've learned? I'm not that interested in passing away with anything of value that I've learned. I think should be shared as quickly and accessibly as possible. But I think the way you asked was about, you have a very clear mission to try and share important learnings and reach new audiences. So we're spiritually aligned on that, my friend.
I love it.
And any time an Oli lands in my inbox, I feel a sort of compulsion to bring
especially
the
when there's a
Olis of the world
variation
together.
in the spelling.
It. You have the only other, what I think is acceptable spelling of the word Oli. And you and I probably both meet lots of OLLIEs. And I think they need to have a long look. Yeah, they need to look at themselves.
Quality.
And I would not say that to Oli Ollerton, face to face. Let me tell you.
Although he's a different character now. He's very calm and spiritual and pleasant.
Yeah, I saw him speak at a league managers event. So I do some work on supporting professional football managers who, probably behind military and sort of frontline personnel have one of the toughest jobs imaginable, through instability, through the number of people who just instantly hate you. So that's not easily managed. And, how much control you have over the verdict of your success. So he spoke at an event there, and I loved his trajectory of travel since we first all met him on this sort of SM, TV program, where he was, of course, playing that role that he had played for many years of hard bastard. And they are a hard bastard. I mean, I had Billy Billingham on my podcast,
yeah.
They are extraordinary folk, and there's so much to learn from them in a world where we didn't get lots of the skills they've acquired. But in real life, they're often far softer and far more amenable than people could ever imagine.
Yeah. And again, Oli is someone that has really given me the time of day and helped me and encouraged me. And yeah, you don't forget these things.
No, top man.
Yeah.
And I think he's got a great reputation in the world of, of personal development. And that's an area he's really putting big strides in. So
thriving.
Good work. Well done,
Absolutely.
Olis.
So today I'm joined by Mr. Oli Patrick. He's a physiologist, performance specialist, and the host of the Energy Equation podcast. That podcast brings together sleep, movement, stress recovery, and Oli's interested in speaking to people that are going to help him and his audience learn everything energy. And similar to my podcast, where I'm trying to become more resilient, I get the sense that you want to learn stuff you don't already know. It's filling
always.
those gaps. Always the
Yeah, and,
student.
there's always a student, and no one knows physiology better than the person who's wearing it. I think the great danger is me telling someone how they feel based on their physiological data. The purpose of the energy equation is there are some interesting pieces of physiology that I've spent years studying and using, everything from heart rate variability, from sleep cycling, from hormone management, this, that, the other. And I can sort of say on paper how these things would contribute to the expression of energy, as in, is the person in front of me tired? Are they flagging? Are they capable of extraordinary physical tasks? But until you match the data with the human experience, you don't know what's true or not. I've sat in front of, my background was originally in health assessments and health screening. I've sat with reams of data from the gut microbiome to all the bloods, to all the imaging, all the MRIs, all the opinions. You've got all that data in front of you, and you're like, until the person walks in the door, I don't know if they're well or not. I still don't know if they're well or not, because the being well, the expression of wellness, the expression of energy is so much more than the data we currently understand. And I know, look, if you don't sleep well, Ollie, you'll be tired the next day. If you don't eat a nourishing diet, you'll be tired. If you have low cardiorespiratory fitness, you'll be tired. These things play in. But really, your energy will be determined by factors much bigger and broader, which tie our two worlds together, which is, who am I? What contribution am I offering? What meaning is there to my existence? Physiology, sadly for me, because as a physiologist, I thought I could solve everything, but physiology doesn't solve lots of the modern day problems people are encountering.
No.
And in many cases, people who've micromanaged their physiology through sort of advanced biohacking are presenting as dysfunctionally as someone who's knocking off at, to the pub at lunchtime and smashing a packet of Bensons, and they're actually living a life that they're quite in tune with, and they feel pretty good.
Yeah.
So the energy equation as a podcast thematic is, energy seems to be the big struggle sort of population wide. Most people are more tired than they would like to be, and that tiredness is expressing through physical fatigue, but also cognitive drain and emotional strain, all these things that play out. And so what I'm trying to do is take people in the public eye, run some physiological tests on them. So heart rate variability for 3 days, a genomic analysis, so looking at their DNA, and go, right, we see you as this beacon of performance. What's going on under the water? What are the mechanics of your sleep, the mechanics of your training, the mechanics of your ability to decompress and manage stress? And how could the listener glean what's useful to their life from that story? And how does the data consolidate or challenge that? So the data is this sort of looming specter that sits over the guest's head, and I can beat them with it or caress them with it, depending on how it goes.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And I think that's why I've invited you onto this podcast, because my podcast is about trying to become more resilient. So the more I learn around physiology and energy, they go hand in hand, because without that solid basis of health and awareness of how to look after your body, I really notice a dip in my mood when I'm not on top of my physiology. Yeah. So how would you say energy fits into resilience, and how we can become more resilient as human beings by doing as much as we can to look after our physiology?
It's a great question, because so often we think of anything to do with mood or psychological assets like resilience, like grit. We think of those as pure play psychological levers. If you like, the only way I can change resilience is through thinking differently or retraining my perspective or managing past traumas, whatever it might be, versus your perception of the world is deeply entwined with how your physiology works. If you take someone and you starve them of sleep, Ollie Ollerton will have told you about this. If you starve someone of sleep for 2 days, you give them perpetual noise, you make them hungry, their mood state will change immeasurably. Nothing there has altered their past experience. You are driving their physiology to a place where cognition cannot exist. And that works very well from an interrogation point of view. It doesn't work so well if you're trying to go to work on that 3rd day. And your physiology into your mood state and your presentation of you as a personality is deeply entwined, to the point where when people talk about psychological health, I would rather they often spoke about brain health, because brain brings this back to the organ that is receiving blood flow, is receiving nutrients, is receiving the clearing of debris through processes like sleep, is again managing its literal electrical patterns based on my perception of threat. And if we ever separate psychology from physiology, we've sort of lost our minds. And all the great psychologists I work with have almost become psychophysiologists, which is, there's no point me talking to you about anxiety if you're hypercaffeinated, if you're mismanaging alcohol, if you're not sleeping, you're not moving, because I don't know what's trauma here. I don't know what's, a difficult, perspective you have on life versus just the physical manifestation of poor habits and behaviors. So in the same ways, I will reach a certain point trying to get someone more well where their limiting beliefs about themselves or a previous past experience or a lack of a growth mindset becomes the block. And I'm like, look, we can't eat a better diet. We can't sleep a better sleep. We can't have a better training program. Now we need to go into breaking down some of those thinking patterns, some of that learned experience, and you'll need talking therapy, professional support in that area. But I would like to think someone's in their psychologist's office or a psychiatrist's office presenting with symptoms that might look like depression or symptoms that might look like, anxiety. And the consultant there is going, do you know what, before I start talking about a 12-week course of cognitive behavioral therapy, wouldn't it be nice if you slept? Wouldn't it be nice if you moved? Wouldn't it be nice if you went out in nature? And I know you and I are both enormous believers in the power of nature, and you promote that brilliantly, Oli. But
Thank you.
that is green therapy and is pure physiology. I'll see a change in brain waves. I'll see a change in blood glucose. I'll see a change in hormones of stress. I'll see all of that happening when I encounter nature. So psychology shouldn't exist without physiology. Physiology shouldn't exist without psychology. But this is the problem I had in clinical practice for years. We've siloed the body into systems that don't exist. Like endocrinology, my hormones, is not different to gastroenterology. My body doesn't work like that. Doesn't think my gastroenterology is separate from my cardiology. We just broke the body down into separate modules so we could build surgeons and consultants who could specialize in gross dysfunction in those areas. So the very sort of segmentation of the body is sort of a ludicrous construct of modern medicine, which is critical for treating disease, but is not the way I should look at myself day to day. I am one symbiotic, harmonic element, and everything good plays into everything else, and everything bad plays into everything else. And the way I look at it, Oli, is we're just every day encountering positive and negative inflections into our physiology through all the mediums of meeting the world. And if someone wants a better energy or better outcome, we tune down the negative inputs and we dial up the positive inputs by the power of one each side, and we'll get a result without a doubt.
Absolutely. And I've recently absorbed that concept as well through speaking to a guy called Adam Parker, who's a detox coach. And his way of looking at it is simple. There's that line. And as long as there's more good coming in than there is bad, and more bad going out than there is good, then you should be all right. And you should, if you can kind of tipple that edge so that there's more this side and less that side, then slowly you'll start to see the difference. But I think from a personal point of view, I kind of did it as a hard stop.
Yes.
Where I really was living one life.
Yeah.
And didn't feel great. And then just through this like chance encounter with the ocean and nature and everything that goes along with that, I did this almost like hard stop where I just introduced everything at once. So it was really hard for me to pinpoint like what is that one thing that's helped me to feel so much better, because I just did everything at once. But for me, it was nature, and it was one day walking down the beach, and I was riddled with anxiety at the time, but I could, just from being next to the ocean, feel how calm I felt. So I thought, there's got to be something in there. So as much as I didn't want to, I then started doing the cold dips and the runs out in nature, and lo and behold, now I live this completely different life. But yeah, how much it's hard to know whether it's good to increment the small changes so you can keep on top of what it is that's making you feel better, or else if you're living a life that is really not helpful and almost harmful, is it better just to go all in and just do the hard stop like I did?
It's definitely better to do more positives all at once. What you've summed there is your challenge would be to determine which of the lovely things you now give your body is the determining feature and why you feel better. And I think we could probably both be confident it is that regular exposure to nature that sits at the heart of that strategy. And that connection you felt when you're by the ocean, we can put some very solid science to biophilia, which is the human's innate connection with nature. And we can say, look, when you're by the ocean, your eye had a much broader horizon that would have downregulated stress response. You would have had likely feet on the ground that could have had an electrophysiological charge difference that downregulates the stress response. You would have seen more colors that naturally imbue the slower brain waves, alpha brain waves in your brain. We could look at the fact that the patterns of nature, including waves and the ocean, would meet what's called fractal patterning, which means your brain is less under threat because the images are so easy to process. So we can draw, study after study to go why in that moment you felt physiologically calmer and less, again, prone to being prepared for threat, which is where anxiety is mirrored very closely in our physiology of anticipating threat. So that all makes sense. From a broader piece, is it better to go all in or titrate one little change at a time? It depends how much you're prepared to change your life. If you're trying to do an experiment, say I'm taking a supplement and I want to work out if the supplement's good, but I'm keeping the rest of my life as it is, you would just take the supplement. And that's why most people don't continue to take supplements, because they add it in, but they add it in with 4 other things and they're never sure whether it made a difference or not. So if you're looking at a lifelong behavior that you're not sure whether you should do or not, ideally from a science point of view, you add it in isolation and you review it after 6 weeks, 12 weeks, and you go, perceptionally, am I sleeping a bit better? Am I feeling a bit better? You give it its space. And that's the way most people would work, because they're not prepared like you, Oli, to pivot, or they're not in enough distress to make that pivot.
No.
Low level distress, as in I'm a bit anxious, I'm a bit dysfunctional, I'm a bit overweight, isn't quite enough to change life strategy. And that's one of the toughest things as a coach, that you can watch someone on a trajectory towards gross dysfunction, but they're not quite dysfunctional enough to make to catalyze that change. Yeah. I think I would always rather someone led a life of positive inputs and felt rewarded, nourished, energized by that. The reality is most people don't have the will or the pain at a volume enough to warrant that pivot, and therefore they're going to add in something. And my counsel there is add in one meaningful thing and commit to it habitually to prove its value to you, because the well-being tourist is the one who picks up a different supplement every 6 weeks and tries sauna for a week and then drops it, and tries HIIT for a week, then drops it, then tries breath work for a week and drops it. And what we've got to think about is these habits are, nothing makes you more well. What you are doing is providing a new input to your physiology that your body goes, well, if this is the new normal, then I'll adapt my tissues and my structures to envelop this new normal. If you're telling me I now have to climb steps every single day, whereas I used to sit on my ass, then what I'll do is the first couple of days I'll complain about it. And then, after that, I'll start to build new musculature, new blood vessels, new mitochondria, so that if that's my new normal, I'll be better prepared for it. And that's what the body's always doing. It's watching what you're asking it to be, and then it's building a structural ecosystem to enable that. So that only happens if you do it again. So if someone's a bit whimsical, flip-floppy between different things, I prefer them to do one thing, consolidate it, believe in it, prove it, then stack another thing on top of that, stack another thing. If someone's at breaking point and they know that they're in a pathway that is going to end up in distress, then do what you do, Oli, and just pivot and smash everything that used to damage you into something that now nourishes you. And I mean nourish in the broader sense, not the nutritional sense. And you're living proof that works as a methodology. And start a podcast.
I think we're very spoiled for choice as well, which we can get sucked into the trendy thing on Instagram, the high rocks, the CrossFit. But from my personal point of view, I like to keep it basic and go out in nature on my own every time. So, but that just works for me. But I feel like there's almost too much choice out there, and people might go, "Oh, high rocks is cool. Now I'm going to go out there just so I can be part of the high rocks gang," and that's why people then follow the next trend, and they haven't quite mastered the one that they were already working on.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I work with Adrienne Adami. So she does the Modern Wellness podcast with me, which is our podcast to the fitness and wellbeing sector. And she's a published author and great. And she's written a book called Decisions That Matter. And in that book, she talks about FOBO, which is, we used to have FOMO, which is, there's something else, fear of missing out.
Yeah.
Now FOBO is fear of a better offer. And we sort of have this in the wellbeing world, but it's really good. And we, she talks about decision fatigue, and so much of what we're encountering is I would bracket this allostatic load. So we have a greater volume of inputs to physiology than any time in lived history, from light to noise to different electromagnetic frequencies, up to 24-hour news, social media. It's just an input fest. And that doesn't mean it's bad, but that perpetual noise, if you like, is creating a perpetual awareness and a perpetual stimulation that we need to find ways to defrag and decompress from. And where you bring solitude and nature are probably two of the greatest ways to push back against this allostatic load. So It's like that is genuinely the antidote to the noise. So it's beautiful. The fear of a better offer is sort of the plague of the fitness and wellness industry. Is, the time I spend in a sauna could have been in a cold plunge, and the time of the cold plunge could have been in a hyperbaric chamber, and the time of the hyperbaric chamber could have been having an IV vitamin infusion, or that could have been time journaling. And you're like, oh God, every time I go on social media, I see someone doing something else that I'm told I should be doing. So I become this sort of wellness journeyman, picking up and dropping these habits before they have a time to genuinely change my tissue composition. So I can have lovely experiences. And I love an experience. I love going for one-off experiences, an immersive sound bath, and I love to, but the habits are the things that will define my physiology, and my physiology will define my health, my well-being, and my capability. So the danger of the fear of a better offer is people can't commit to the thing long enough and meaningfully enough for it to change your tissue. I see this well with personal trainers, right, Oli? I see someone do a completely different training program every single time they come in the gym. So how do we get the neuromuscular adaptation? If they haven't done a chest press, 20 times in 8 weeks, how can we expect them to have reached the limit of skill and now be targeting the requirement of tissue change? So we've got to be careful we don't die through 1,000 choices. And when you say that you commit to the simple things are the only things that will work, because I would always change the word simple to doable, right? I don't care if it's simple. I don't care if it's a hyperbaric chamber. If you want to do it, you've got to do it 2-3 times a week for the next 5 years. You're going to do that. And again, I strongly believe that for some people should be the thing they do. But I think principle here is we need to change the word simple to doable, because everyone's like, Oli, all your advice is always very simple. It's like, no, my advice is doable, which means I expect you to do it and keep doing it and reap the rewards from having done it. Simple is the wrong word, because simple implies it's obvious. It's not obvious. All the things we're talking about are the path of most resistance. Path of least resistance: sit on your ass, encounter a doom scrolling feast while nailing down ultra processed food. So these aren't simple, but if they're going to work, they have to be doable.
Nice. Is there anything on that list of FOBO that kind of is drawing you in at the moment that you've got as something that you're looking at doing? Is there anything on the list that you want to add into your routine at the moment? Anything caught your eye?
I love it all. It's a good question, that, Ollie. I obviously a big fan. So from my point of view, I get a lot of crap off my mates because I seem to do more recovery than load. So they're like, I'll be in my compression trousers. They'll be like, "Did you run?" I'll be like, "No, but I walked." And then I'll be doing an infrared sauna. They'll be like, "Oh, have you done anything exertional?" I'll be, "No." So I use a lot of recovery modalities as part of my day-to-day existence, partly because I'm busy at this stage of life. And a lot of the things that ask of me are energy out, and I put huge value on energy in behaviors and restorations. I also have a great privilege of working with lots of brands that mean I can get some of these tools at fees that aren't broadly democratic. So the infrared and red light sauna I have, is expensive, and it's a privilege. I have access to hyperbarics. I have access to cold. I have a whole range of things that mean I can't really compare my lifestyle to others who aren't working in this sector and receiving these things in skill swaps or commercial deals, etc. So I think the thing that keep catching my eye, obviously I'm involved in the longevity movement and this idea of longevity as a vehicle for wellness. My internet looked like it dropped there. Sorry. I'm back. Am I with you?
Good.
Great. Okay, super.
Didn't drop.
So, okay, great. So from a longevity point of view, that's obviously the fastest growing area within the wellness ecosystem. And I think the reason for that is it makes sense to the consumer. So longevity, I sort of get it. If I take this pill, I live longer, or maybe I spend less years ill. We're talking about health span, obviously. And wellness doesn't mean anything to anyone. Wellness is, I remember flying out to an international conference with some senior people in fitness, and someone said, "I want to talk about wellness." Someone said, "I want to talk about wellness." It was, it was a contrast therapy. Someone wants to talk about wellness. It was a blood test. But wellness means different things to different people, and it needs
Absolutely.
context against what does wellness mean to you, Oli, at this stage of your life versus what does it mean to me. So that's its beauty from a clinical point of view, but it's its challenge from a marketing point of view. So longevity is a marketeer's dream because it's all these things that sort of make sense immediately on the can. So in the world of longevity, I have been increasingly interested in some of the science around slowing down what's called the hallmarks of aging, which are these, again, people say it's 12 or 13 biological facets of why I go from being a lovely spongy baby to being a grizzled old man, and then I die. And we cheery stuff, but really,
it's life, though.
It's life. But the people are interested in, well, what then is actually changing between bouncy baby grizzled man? And they found that there's these sort of series of biological changes that happen as we age. Then you've got this whole new community going, well, if those 12 things are true, why don't we block or reverse each of those 12 things? And this field of biogerontology is sort of running alongside longevity. So longevity for most people is weight training, cardio, proper sleep, proper nutrition, boom. On the other side of the coin, you've got stem cells, gene editing, you've got blood cleaning, a whole range of things that are probably being spawned out of clinics in San Francisco and Honduras, all sorts of interesting, exciting places. But between those two worlds, we often find this molecule NAD, which you might have seen people raving about. So coming to my point, I'm interested in just logically, how do I reduce the depreciation of this important molecule in energy production called NAD in a way that seems to be scientifically robust? And I've spent a lot of time with some molecular scientists, and I had a lady called Nicola Conlon on my podcast, who is a pioneer in sort of NAD research. And I'm interested from my point of view, what am I leaning towards? I'm pretty good with my behaviors, Oli. I'm pretty good with knowing what I need to do and what I need to keep working on. But I wouldn't mind a shortcut in energy production. And I work with Heights, which is a supplement company, and their research team I've been close to. They've got in-house doctors, in-house clinical nutritionists and dietitians, and they've created a new product which will boost my natural levels of NAD by providing a slightly adapted version of vitamin B3. So it's called Niagen. Okay. And Niagen, plus a couple of additional symbiotic ingredients, has been proven to increase the NAD in my cells. So my next thing is always, can I leverage science to a logical place at a behavior I'm prepared to encompass? And I'm pretty comfortable with my running, my gym, my sauna, my hyperbaric, my cold, my connection with nature, my connection with family, my job, those things. I've got a pretty good ecosystem. Yeah. So what do I need to do? My FOBO would be making sure I take a pill that might add a value that if I didn't take it, I wouldn't get. So and again, I work with Heights. Interestingly, they sponsor my podcast, but they don't sponsor me. But I love their products, and they're launching this product called Thrive in November, and it's for me the most judicious, sort of carefully thought through NAD precursor product I've seen on the market. So it's lovely.
Brilliant.
That did sound like a sales pitch. Dan will be very happy with me, the owner of.
It's good. That's what these podcasts are for. Like for me, it's as much as we're extracting information. It's making life easy when we're trying to find short form content to put out and make everyone's life easier and just get our messages out there in any way we can at the time, isn't it? It's
spot on. Yeah. You hope you meet someone with the right message at the right time. And of course, people listening to this, we hope that something in this is useful one way or another.
And I don't know about you, but I feel like the more I do this podcast game, the less I believe in coincidence, in that people come into your life at just the right time and give you that little bit of information that you didn't have before. And when you're speaking to someone on a podcast, especially, you've got no choice but to listen intently without being distracted, because if you don't, you lose where you are, and you haven't got yourself into position to come back and answer a question. So
totally agree. It's why I love podcasts. You're forced to listen to me, Oli.
Yeah.
Forced.
I love it.
You've got nowhere to go. But you're locked in. It's a lovely form and it's for people who haven't hosted a podcast, you're spot on in nailing that. When I'm filming the energy equation, you have this unique scenario that you've got to lock into that conversation, because the person listening to you knows if you're listening or not. We're talking now, you're not looking at your notes. You're not going, oh shit, I'm 4 out of 9 questions in. You're just picking up on something I'm saying and then going in the next direction. And it's a strange form of finding a truly engaging, deep conversation, which has to be the case, whilst also curating an experience for your listener, which is what you're doing beautifully, pal. So it's rock and roll.
Was there a time where you wrote questions? Do you still write questions to fall back on, or do you go with the flow where you can?
Both. So definitely write questions in terms of, these are key areas I want to get into.
Yeah.
Because the energy equation is produced by the High Performance Podcast, it has quite a big team. So in the studio, we have 1 or 2 videographers, you have sound, you have a producer, you have an editor. It's normally a celebrity guest, so they will have their agent, possibly their friend, and then you are actually live streaming the recording to a room just outside. So you're like, can't completely cock this up. It was a slightly different level of pressure to what I was used to before. And at the same time, you're trying to be locked in. You value, particularly because I'm doing a proxy clinical consultation, I've got to be in it because I can't miss a single word being said. But I do have then key points I have to hit. The benefit of my podcast is I've got thematics that I will cover, their definition of energy, their contributors to that. Then I've got data on their sleep, data on their stress levels, data on their fitness, and I've got their DNA analysis. So I've got 4 placeholders with a result, if you like, in each. And then all I need to do is give them that information and see where that takes us. So it's a bit of a cheat, really.
Yeah, because I love
in that way
just going with the flow. I initially, for the first 20, I wrote down all these questions.
Yes,
but I found myself exactly as you said there, just taking my eye off the screen.
Yeah,
and I think that's a bit off-putting for the guest for one thing. But then I'll start reading a question, and I just, for me now, and I was forced into it by a guy called Brad Howard, who said, I don't know if you know him, he's over in Marbella, he does a lot of Ironman stuff. Yeah, he's a really good guy. And we just had this freestyle conversation, and it felt different, and I really enjoyed it. And from there, wherever I can, I've tried my hardest just to not prep. And I say not prep, I still like to do research so I know a bit of the background.
Yes.
But just see where it goes. But then sometimes it can kind of mean you miss certain points because you can get sucked into lots of different nuances, and then you've missed out a big section of like the key information that was there. So it's just forever learning.
If it didn't come up, it probably wasn't key information. I think it's that case of, again, if you're interested in it, we've got to hope the listener's interested in it. And that is, again, speaking podcast host to podcast host, that is the ambition, that you're talking, but really you're listening for you and you're listening for them. And you're listening. I've got that challenge where, as part of the energy equation, I've got now medical experts coming on who are all great communicators, but I can still sense when they say something someone won't understand. They still dropped in ATP, and no one knows what adenosine triphosphate is and what its role is. And you can't leave people with these sort of little nuggets of information which are partially explained. So it's that strange blend of you are in a conversation, but you're also an interpreter, because you know your audience better than anyone else. And I think knowing who's listening and what they're listening for further shapes your ability to be in that moment more and prep less. On the prep side, I have a slight challenge that lots of my guests are celebrities and they've written books. So I will read their book before they come in, and I'll listen to their last 2 podcasts. And, and hopefully none of that comes up, but it does give me that sense of, I feel the values of the person. I understand their sort of philosophical journey. And because I'm not doing a tell me about yourself podcast where they go, this is how I became famous, and this is how I won my Olympic medal. I'm looking at them clinically, as in how they manage and restore energy. I need to know that information for that to make sense, but I don't have the time on my podcast to ask it.
I like it a lot. So, is there a time that Oliver Patrick was a very different person? And if so, is that deep down something that's deep rooted in the reasons why you do what you do now?
I don't think so. I know that I've been a fairly calm, even guy. I've faced the oscillating challenges of life, from bereavements to, life events that throw you. But I didn't have a sort of road to Damascus pivotal moment, and that's the great blessing of a blessed life, right? In terms of it's very difficult to ever feel how someone else feels unless you walk a mile in their shoes. My shoes have been pretty easy, and I'm not there to put in false challenges or false obstacles. I have just always been an eternal optimist. I love people, and I love other people being happy in a sort of very important way. I did have a brain scan when I was early in clinical practice, something called EEG, electroencephalography. And she's a psychoneurophysiologist. She said I had the biggest empathy waves she'd ever seen on a thing. And she related that actually to when I got knocked out. So she said that I'd received a head trauma that had created something called a contracoup, where my brain had bounced against the back of my skull. And the slight adaptation to that was increased empathy. And I was like, I don't know if that is true or not, but my ability to feel what someone else is feeling has always been a blessing and a curse. My kids would be like, why are you crying at that TV advert? And I'm like, because the kid found his dog, and
I'm the same. Always animals. Always animals.
Do you know what mine is, Ollie? Mine is selflessness. I find it, if you just, one of the things I love, and bear in mind, I had a clinic where I looked after global high net worths and achievers for years, and I've no interest in whether you are successful. Truthfully, I respect it enormously. It doesn't draw me to you. Kind people are what I get drawn to, and people who give themselves selflessly. And I give myself, but not selflessly. There's always something in it for me. Be that, and sometimes that is the feeling of feeling happy, which is, you can end up in a loop to saying, well, that's all selfless acts still give some affirmation back to the individual. But I think on my journey, the things that I naturally love are the things I lent into and were probably well received in a world where they're not as abundant as we both think they should be. Being truly kind, being genuinely interested in the prospering of other people, and not entirely obsessed with a commercial version of success was the pathway I picked up on early in my life, and has given me to this point a very fortunate quality of life without a big pivot. And I've left entrepreneurially, I've left really secure positions in big organizations with great pathways and just dropped out and gone on my own. And I've done that twice now. Left thriving. Nuffield was head of physiology and nutrition, and we were booming, and went and did a startup. And then I left the startup that was thriving and growing and brilliant team to go out completely on my own, because I'm always checking in with my values. And when I'm not leading a life that matches the version of me that I hope to be, then I have made big changes at that point, supported by my wife, who would rather I was happy than wealthy.
What an unbelievably honest and beautiful answer. I love that, and I respect that so much. And I can actually see that in you. And I think that's why I reached out to you, because it's hard. For me, it's quite easy to see like the genuine version, because there's a lot of people that claim to be selfless and claim to be kind. I'm not saying I'm here to judge anyone whether they are or they aren't, but I like to think I'm a reasonably good judge of character.
Yes.
And it's clear that you mean what you say, and you say what you mean. It's so nice to see. But do you think there's such a thing as being like too selfless? Because that's something I feel myself and it was interesting you said you kind of get something back, because I think if you're always giving to others and that's depleting you, then I think the actual version of yourself you're able to give isn't even worth giving at all.
Spot on. I think that is the problem. And again, let me not paint myself as a saint here, Ollie. That is not principle. These are traits that I've lent into and been aware of. But if you compared my life to a frontline worker, a nurse, a hospice carer, it would be a disgrace to compare me to them, truth be told, in terms of the way they live a life of servitude. I do not do that, right? So I have traits that have enabled me to do well in the sectors I'm in, but I've got to be cautious that I'm not painting a foot. My wife, my friends will listen to this and be like, absolutely not. Hard no. And of course, there's a comparative scale with everything. But I think what I'm good at to balance that is I've got enough selfishness around self-care. So if I'm meant to be going to an event, which is important to a friend, and I'm totally frazzled and out, I'll probably call them and go. If it's not critical that I'm there, I won't go. I'll draw up the drawbridge. My life is built around my kids and my wife, but I will still leave them after a busy week for an hour to go to the gym or go and do something restorative, because I know that an hour less junk Ollie gives 2 hours better quality Ollie. And I know that, again, that's just a very strategic view. And I think a lot of people who've got a greater version of selflessness than I suffer, because to be well, you must be quite self-focused. And selfish is a challenging word, because it implies that it's purely for your gain. And of course, true self-care is everyone else's gain. But I think, that's the great challenge that you and I would historically face, which is you neglect yourself in the service of others.
Absolutely.
And fundamentally, that no one wins in that scenario. And I'd spent a lot of time trying to encourage people to just see that the investment in time, the investment in cost, will reap an external reward to those people you love and care about. And again, if you do it over time, that's unequivocally true. The short term, when everyone's tired and now you're going to the gym and everyone's knackered and now you're going off for a walk by the beach, is the hardest period of time, because you get all the cost, none of the benefit. Down the line, everyone gets the benefit. That's the reality. So I am good at that. And, I'm hoping that you're getting good at that too.
Getting better. I feel this year in particular has been completely different to last year. I feel like I've been on like a 3-year journey where first year was just intrigued. Second year was trying everything, but giving too much to everyone. No boundaries whatsoever. Didn't have the ability to say no. Had to reply to every message I got. And then this year I'm getting better, but I still have moments where I get it wrong. But that's life, I suppose. But when was the last time you felt depleted in yourself, and what was the reason for that?
Probably last summer. I committed to some projects. I have retained relationships with some wonderful employers, but I'm still mostly self-employed. And going from forging businesses, even the business I started up, there was cash to pay salaries at the start. So I'd never been hand to mouth before. And so when I came into the world of consulting and picking up different clinical directorships on or brand advisory roles, it was a new thing. And suddenly you're like, oh my God, will this tap turn on? Will it turn off? And you say yes to everything. And I basically said yes to some really big projects that were going to start in September, and just hadn't factored in how much prep I'd need to do during summer holidays. And my twins are 12 years old, and I'm acutely aware that, particularly with twins, you get 16 summers really, because and even now they want to spend more time with their friends. But I've been their best friend, with my wife this whole period of their lives. So to lose a week in summer is an extraordinary cost to me. If I think about, these are the defining value moments of my life. And I basically was trying to be all dad all summer whilst prepping for some extraordinary project launches on national gym groups, with content creation, with prepping for podcasting, and was genuinely working, into the night. I was napping and I was saunering and I was training. I was doing all the things I needed to do to keep myself propped up. And again, this isn't someone camped outside a war zone and siege mentality. This is sort of middle class challenges. But I ran out of gas. I ran out of gas on holiday, and was just didn't have the energy to want to do the fun dad bit. And I was a bit knackered. Ended up having to take a day and a half to sit in a hotel room on my laptop, which I've just never done before. And again, there'll be a lot of people going boo hoo, but I sort of ran out of the steam that kept me as I hope a sort of high energy person.
Yeah.
And then had to deliver on those projects. And I said to my wife, I'm just not sure when I go back I can do what is asked of me. And she's always great. She was like, yeah, you will find it. And you find it. And it was the projects were incredible. And the great benefit I have is every project I work on, I love the people I work with. I'm fortunate enough that I work with no dicks at all, like not even half of a dick. If anyone who works with me is listening to this, I'm talking about you. I genuinely, every day, whichever company I'm working with, I go in and it's like a family environment, and I love them all, and they're all bright and different perspectives. So I was lifted up by just the sheer professional capability of the colleagues on those projects. But we all get it slightly wrong, and it's that sense of, now it's a bit like you, that ability to say no more. So I haven't done. I got asked on lots of podcasts. Not that I'm some kind of guru, but I've said no to most of them. I've done a couple this week, which is the first I've done in 6 months. And I've got I got an EA in to protect my diary and stop me saying yes to everything, and that's been a great blessing. So Jess is a bit of a hero. It's a lifelong relationship with inputs and outputs, Oli. And sometimes you haven't got enough inputs and you just go searching for them. Sometimes you've got too many and you've got to be bold enough and brave enough to push some away. And I think that's both professional, social, performance. It's not signing up to do a 10K when you've got nothing in the tank. And I'd said yes to too many things. And now this year has been the year of no.
When you were in that phase, did you feel the negative self-talk creeping in?
Just, there's always, I hold myself to high judgment because I should know better. But I'm also, again, I am good at being kind to myself. I don't have a negative internal voice. I have I know. And it's like, that will be down.
That's such a strength.
It's great. If I do a mistake, it'll be like, I sort of have that voice that goes, well, you did the best you could. So there'll always be context. I'm good at empathy to other people. I'm also quite good at empathy to myself. That it's like, you are doing the best you can with what you've got, where you're at. And I know that phrase, which is deeply enshrined in the high performance mentality. So Jake Humphrey and Damien Hughes, you're saying doing the best you can with what you've got where you're at. And Phil Neville originally said that on their podcast, and I think he was sort of leveraging a version from Theodore Roosevelt, who said it originally. And it's that sense of, why would I have done any better? I am me, so I forgive me quickly. And I recognize there were factors at play that I could learn from. I was at a great talk yesterday from Sophie Lawler, who's the CEO of Total Fitness. And she was on stage at the Health Club Manager Conference, which I was speaking at. And she came on and said, there's no good news or bad news. There's just news.
Nice.
And so as a CEO, she's like, someone came in and said, we've got bad news. She said, it's just news. And what I'll do now is I'll react to that news and work around it. And easier said than done, but these perspectives are critically important. That, in most of our lives, all the sort of stresses we create are manufactured versions of, what I expected to happen and what I think is going to happen next. Very few of those things truly exist. And I'm pretty good at living in the now.
I love that. And for me, when you were talking earlier about the people you work with being so good, and how when you were in that vulnerable place of maybe having a little dip, but they brought you up and brought your energy up, and how you feel you work with such brilliant people.
Yes.
Well, I actually would suggest maybe that's because if we're all mirrors of our environment, that's because of the way you feel about yourself, in that you do respect yourself and you're kind to yourself, and therefore the way you see the people you're around is a reflection of how you see the world through your eyes.
I hope so. It's a lovely perspective. Yeah, I think, you surround people with a similar vibe. When you have that slight ability to be more in control of your commercial environment, is a freelancer or picking up projects, you can also just go, I'm resonating with this person. And I think the most important thing is not that all our personalities click or we're all, hyper effervescent or super kind, is that our values connect. And I think on every project I'm involved in, my values align with the organization and the senior leaders, because these are people trying to do good. And I see their intent to do good as something I'm getting on board with. So I feel like and of course you can get purposeful burnout, right? Because every project is so meaningful and so engaging. I just forget again that self-care piece. But I think I'm not surrounded by people who look and sound like me. I'm surrounded by people with similar values to me. And that's where I'm
visualizing almost a meeting where there's a discussion and decisions to be made, and there's decisions that could mean actually everyone gets really rich or gets viral, but everyone in the room without speaking knows that's not the one we're going for. We're going for this one because this is the right one to choose.
100%. And I'd shout out every company I work with, but you look at Everyone Active, who we launched a new Wellbeing membership to improve the well-being of their communities. That's what they wanted to do. Now, it has generated revenue, but it was it was very clearly to enhance the quality of lives of the people who encountered that brand. And there were multiple things that have come up along the journey that could have been expedited as more commercially viable, but it's come back to the values that sits at the heart of the program. So they've been a great example, similar with Pure Gym, who I've worked with, who said, we're not going to try and commercialize well-being and sell widgets and oddities to our members. We're going to really, really drive at making our workforce as well as we possibly can, and understand their challenges around the shift patterns and the regional managers, and what are their limitations in terms of sleep and movement and social connection. And so again, these are nice projects, and what's great is because we've come at them from a slightly different perspective. We've got the Everyone Active membership is up for a host of awards at UK Active next week. The corporate wellbeing program we've done with Pure Gym is up for the Personnel Awards, corporate wellbeing program of the year. And they're starting from a place of, how do we do more good with people who genuinely want to do that? And so it doesn't surprise me that they're getting recognition externally for the people who spearheaded those two programs. Not me, but I'm over the moon. And that's just an example of people are interested in values now. Again, there was a talk from one of the CEOs of a gym group yesterday saying that the modern consumer for a gym, I think 11% of their consumers were drawn to a brand because of the values of the brand. This is new world, right? This is this Gen Z influence, millennials to a certain extent, but Gen Zs are going, what's your approach to sustainability? What's your approach to what well-being philosophy are you promoting here? Or are you just a cash cow who wants to fleece me? And that change in consumers comes for me at the right time, where those who have built products out of true values will stand the test of time.
I agree wholeheartedly. And that for me gives you hope that it is going in the right direction. When if you look in the wrong place, then you see everything you don't want to see, and people that portray to be a health and well-being guru, but then the next story is complete contradiction and not living the life of the person they preach to be, which is sad, but it's the world we live in. And I can see with yourself from the backstory and through the stories and you put on, you live the life that you talk about, and it's evident, and even more so now having spoken to you today.
Well, I hope so. And that life is not pious or judgmental or squeezed. Yeah, so I was at a video shoot yesterday, and we got pizzas in, and everyone's like, "You won't eat a pizza, will you?" And I was, "Of course, I'll eat a pizza. Of course." You know, it's
Absolutely.
like well-being isn't a shackle jacket. You know, people think this is a set of rules that deprive you of all freedom and movement. It's about saying, coming back to our central point again, it's about the volume of inflections that go into your physiology. Are there more positive, nourishing inflections than there are negative? That doesn't mean that some of the negatives won't be also aligned with positive experiences. Alcohol's a great example. You know, alcohol's been rightly demonized, as in the data doesn't stack up. It has no health benefit, alcohol. But the removal of the social construct of the pub and the decompression of the post-work drink, the change in dating from organic conversations met with our frontal lobes slightly disengaged to very technical tick box exercises through Tinder and online dating. These are huge societal changes that don't make people more happy. No. So I love a drink with lots of my friends where our whole legacy of friendship was built around alcohol. I love a pizza on a Sunday night with my kids after we've done a weekend of sport. We just want to eat something that's extraordinarily salty and, you know, high pleasure, poor nourishment. So I think, again, the danger is if you put yourself out there as if your wellness is my wellness is your wellness, then you can't do those things because you're creating a template you hope others subscribe to. I don't put out my life as the template of wellness. I put out my lived experience of 1,000 lives, 2,000, 10,000 lives that I've met and say, do any of these meet what you're trying to find? And I think that is where the wellness influencer place is really interesting. If you are promoting your lifestyle as the template, you're stuck. You're stuck. If you are promoting nuance, context, science, and balance and kindness, then you are omnipresent, I think. So that's the bad piece.
It's funny, I tend to find myself now, because I've spoke to maybe 40 people on my podcast, I'll go more to something a previous guest has told me than like what's in my own bank of knowledge. But then when you think about it, well, that is actually my bank of knowledge now because I've learned it from them. So we're all just sponges, I think.
100%. I mean, if you hang out with Jake Humphrey, who's a wonderful human being, you know, and is genuinely got a desire to change, you know, the happiness of people and allow people to find their purpose. Very aligned with another guy I know and friends with, Simon Squip, who's the guy who does, you know, what's your dream? These are purpose-driven individuals. But both of them have got they've got this portfolio of lived experiences that they can then add to this bigger narrative. It's like a chef with just every ingredient. So Jake will have a story from, I think they did the 400th episode of the High Performance podcast. You know, so he's got, this is what this Formula One driver said, and this is when we met with, you know, Michael Jordan's free throw coach, and that's the tapestry, and all of that is his learning, and you know, and he can put his take on that.
It myself, it's incredible.
And so when you do this podcast, Oli, of course, it's for the listeners and those who go with you on the journey and listen to all of this. It becomes part of their day-to-day reportage and their understanding. But the host will win because you win every time.
Whether you agree or disagree, because you've still been challenged to look at something new, make your own mind up, bank.
Spot on. And that's also a critical piece, right? Can you get voices that are slightly discordant with yours and someone who doesn't believe in resilience, or someone who says, no, this is grind culture and push through? Because there's a perspective to be learned from everyone. And that inability, you know, this echo chamber of wellness is ghastly to a certain extent, a very middle-aged word, ghastly. You know, the principle, because it's like no one here is producing the counter view, you know. And I always say to people in the fitness and leisure sector, how much time have you spent with people who freaking hate the gym, right? Because all of my life was spent with people who aren't in the gym, who aren't in a hospital. They were Gen Pop, you know, coming for health screening, coming in for a blood test, coming in for a body composition. Gen Pop aren't that interested in lots of things you're talking about, and they feel pretty good, some of them. So don't tell them they feel bad because they don't follow your lifestyle.
No.
So I think that slightly discordant opinion or different perspectives, not to create argument. I don't enjoy conflict unless it's absolutely critical. I think I enjoy differing opinions, trying to work out what the middle ground is. And I think podcasts can be a great medium for that.
So we're almost at the hour. I didn't want to keep you for longer than an hour, but there was one thing that I was hoping to pick your brains on, and
Yes.
we were chatting before we started. So I've just launched a business, which is a portable wood fire sauna and cold water plunge. The cold water plunge is around 12 to 15 degrees. So not at the ice, it's just running water. But I believe
like that
for me, I prefer that. And especially for newer people, putting them in a 4-degree tub, you could have some issues there with a lot of people. So 2 ice tubs, sat looking at the sea, access to the sea, and then the wood fire sauna in 60 seconds. So I can create a nice little reel for it. What are the biggest benefits of the contrast therapy between hot and cold?
Yes. 60 seconds on contrast therapy. I'll tell you now, what you've got there is pretty close to utopia. So, we are moving away here from something that is nice to do on a holiday break to a behavior that should start to be considered equal to exercise in its potential value to health, well-being, and longevity. 4 saunas a week on the Finnish sauna study of 20 minutes, we've got a 50% reduction in cardiovascular disease, biggest killer on the planet. Why? Because heat and cold create this extraordinary thing called a hormetic stress, right? So heat is extraordinarily good for us in several different ways. It mimics exercise. So it looks a bit like you're doing a sort of zone 1, zone 2 workout. That's great. So we call it an exercise mimetic. In that heat, my body is trying to keep itself alive. So it's going to release a multitude of biological factors that protect me from damage, but actually have a much greater benefit post-sauna. We see things like brain-derived nootropic factor, BDNF, which is a huge role in neuroplasticity and brain health. We see, again, heat shock proteins, these elements that ultimately can repair cellular damage, reduce inflammation. We see sweating, one of the body's major natural biological detoxification methods. We see a massive surge of sympathetic nervous activation followed by a massive surge of parasympathetic. In simple terms, we create the stress to get a deeper dive into the recovery and relaxation afterwards. Sauna, for me, is a an all-in-one health and well-being intervention mixed with pleasure, mixed with endorphins. I couldn't be a bigger believer in the value that we currently understand of sauna and the prospective future value. Contrast therapy brings a new dimension. Contrast, specifically taken from hot to cold, is broadly positioned at the moment as a musculoskeletal recovery tool. So if I've done leg weights, heavy run, I can expect reduced sensation of muscle soreness, delayed onset of muscle soreness. I might get quicker return to play. And it's sort of this vasoconstriction where the blood vessels get very squeezed in the cold, and then vasodilation when they get very hot very dilated in the heat. Seems to have a role of flushing out the byproducts of high metabolic activity, exercise. Cold on its own is a potent way of driving physiological calm, because despite that initial shock when I enter the water, what gradually happens is my body moves into a deeper state of physiological relaxation, which is entwined with, again, further reduction in muscle soreness and a promotion of sleep and a promotion of being still. Smash that into a high nature environment, and you're going to tell me who shouldn't be doing it. And I'll tell you, Oli, that for me is as good a well-being intervention as any supplement, any drug, anything you can find. If you do that with a friend or on your own, if that's aligned with physical activity and some nutritional habits, dear God, people are going to love it. So I think it's a brilliant move, mate. It's a brilliant, brilliant product.
So excited. And yeah, like you said, and we spoke earlier about the benefits of just looking at the sea and the ocean and the sky, where you're going to have that as your view. You're going to have exfoliating rubs. We're going to have breath work. We're going to have sound therapy. We're going to have it all in there. Like Brixham, my hometown, is full of all these other people, practitioners that I'm friends with. And I just want to bring everyone together, and just, as much as the world portrays that we're all going down in the dumps, well, I want to stand up and say, well, no, this is something that you can take control of your own health and happiness.
100. Listen, if you put that in central New York, it's a $400 a month minimum members club. I've been in some of the top, thermal experiences in London at 5-6K annual recurring revenue, because this has been premiumized into the wellness market because of the way people feel when they do it, right? And we're talking earlier about habit formation. This is a wonderful experience, but this should be a habitual place. If you build out a social wellness ecosystem of connection and other activities that keep bringing you to that space, learning new things, finding new people, you truly have a genuine, brain, body, soul well-being intervention and the people in Brixham should be biting your hand off to get down there.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And the invite, the offer is there. If you and some friends ever want to come down and jump in the sauna and cold plunge and see, then be lovely to see you and be able to buy you a coffee in return for giving me your time today.
My time is an absolute pleasure. The concept's brilliant. What you're trying to do, Oli, is brilliant. The way you're going about it is also brilliant. So it's been an absolute pleasure to have this time with you.
No, thank you so much. And I can't thank you enough for one, turning up, two, for being so honest, and three, for just giving us so much information that I do truly believe, if people listen to it, and I hope they do, that people will take stuff away from this that will undoubtedly help them to become more resilient. Because if we can start to unpick what's going on inside your body and inside your mind and how they fit into this big bad world, then you can only ever improve life for you and everyone around you. So I've certainly learned a lot today. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. It means a hell of a lot for me for you to turn up today.
Absolute pleasure. Perfect summary. Top man, Oli.
Cheers, Oli. Right, just stay on for a second, mate.